All right, Mrs. Juenemann. What are some discipline options available to the principals at your schools?
We always try to go from least to most, because the whole point of discipline is to try to help the child learn what is acceptable behavior and what is appropriate behavior. So first, of course, we just want to change the course of behavior and do a lot of discussing, talking with, counseling the student to point out how his behavior choices might be made differently towards a more positive choice. But if it comes down to some of the things that we choose to do, we can use a simple time out, which means remove the student from the setting for a certain amount of time, perhaps a detention before or after school. We can do a lot, especially at Chautauqua. The principal chooses community service or service to the school. And this has proved to be very beneficial to our students, and it is something that we continue to do. We can always use Saturday schools, which is something that we don't use very often, if at all, at Chautauqua or St. Paul. We can remove privileges, and then, of course, for more serious behavior, we can do in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension or an expulsion.
So, what are some reasons for suspension in or out of school or expulsion?
Well, the behavior has to be probably chronic. It has to be severe behavior. We have to have worked with the student to try to remedy the behavior or the choices that the student is making. But some of the reasons would be any violation, willful or blatant disregard for any published school rules, any conduct that disrupts the normal procedure for the day, any conduct which endangers the safety or well-being of any student or staff member, and any conduct that would be considered illegal by local, state, or federal laws.
Do your schools or you allow corporal punishment?
No, we do not. And more districts do not allow corporal punishment. This is something that I, as a superintendent, have never allowed in any of my schools, for the simple reason that the purpose of discipline is try to change the behavior of the student without involving even more violence or negative remediation to the student. We want the student to feel safe in our schools, and therefore we do not allow corporal punishment of any kind in our district schools.
That's great. Are discipline rules different for, say, special education students?
Yes, there are a few. Of course, we have to be very careful to follow state and federal laws when dealing with a special needs student or the student who's on an IEP. Normally, we use the rules and regulations that we would for any student in the district, and we always try to include that statement in the IEP. But if the behavior of the special needs student is so severe that it requires more than a 10-day suspension, then we have to have a due process meeting in which the IEP team determines whether the misconduct was a manifestation of the student's disability. In other words, did the misbehavior result because of the student's disability? You understand?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now I have one last question here for you, and is are there any federal laws that affect local discipline decisions?
Yes. Of course, weapons for a student to have weapons on school grounds. That is an offense punishable up to 186 days out of school suspension. Of course, we take a look at those kinds of situations on a case-by-case basis and try to determine the reason, cause, intent, and to go on like that. But basically and usually, we are required to expel the student for a whole year for weapons. Also, drugs. We do have very specific guidelines for drugs possessions or drugs with the intent to sell. And usually on those situations, we simply call in law enforcement and let them handle it as a legal matter.
Wow. What about, you were talking about weapons besides guns. Is there a limit on knives, or is there no students allowed?
Yes, there is a limit on knives. We try to have no knives at all. Some schools or districts have a length limit on a blade. So like a simple pen knife, a little inch-long pen knife may or may not be an infraction in a school district. But we try to educate our students not to have any sharp weapons on them at all, including folding knives or what we might call pen knives.
Well, thank you, Ms. Juenemann, for this interview. It was very, very informative, and I appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Good luck.